Welcome to the Meat and Potatoes podcast. Today we're joined by Kent White, who is the CEO of Child's Hope Foundation. How are you?
I'm doing good. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm excited to see how this goes.
Let's figure it out.
Sometimes, I know you a little bit through Tribe House and a few other interactions. Sometimes you're loaded for bear. Sometimes you're just going to keep her even keel.
Yeah, it depends. I don't know how many subscribers you have, so we'll see how loose I can be.
It's a decent number, and you can do whatever you want.
Oh, okay.
But let's set the table because you guys do important stuff, and you actually move the needle, and it's fun to learn about. What is the Child Hopes Foundation?
The Child's Hope has been around for about 22 years now. 2002, we got together. And I've been involved since 2003, so not one of the founders, but have been involved since the very beginning, and mostly as a volunteer. And then in 2019, the board asked me to come on full time and to run it. So, Child's Hope's main purpose is to help orphan children get into families and get into better lives. And we started off in Haiti with building an adoption orphanage, and started that in 2004. That facility got finished, and then thousands of kids got adopted through that facility over the years until it was recently shut down. We didn't run it past 2007. It went independent, and then we started our Mexico service trips because there was no money to do anything back in 2007, 2008. And so we just kind of went on life support for a few years and just did, like, Perry Brought and I started the service trip program in Mexico and Baja and did 4 trips a year and just kept doing that until other people wanted to get involved. And then last year, I think we did 42 trips.
Wow.
And about, I don't know, we're over 11,000 volunteers that have been down to Haiti and Mexico over that time period. So yeah, it's kind of I hosted 1 trip this year. So it's kind of, I don't do anything really valuable anymore around there in that way, the day-to-day stuff.
Yeah. So the trips, that's a lot of people. A lot of flights, a lot of logistics. They're down there putting their time, money,
Yeah.
and
Volunteers pay for themselves to get down there, and it's usually family groups that go down. We do have some corporate groups and school groups and others that do some work there, but for the most part, it's been volunteer families.
Yeah. Orphans in America are different than orphans in the rest of the world, right? We were talking a little bit before. I don't know when the last orphanage in America shut down.
I'm not positive either. You're going to have to pull that up, Zach. But I think it was in the 70s. But there's still orphanages in the United States. We just don't call them that. We call them group homes now.
Yeah.
And so orphaned children, a lot of kids are orphaned by the state, meaning you're taken from your parents. And that's definitely the case in Baja specifically. Most of the kids there have been removed from their families because they're not safe there. 80% of the kids there have experienced some form of sexual abuse, and it's been very challenging to help those kids heal from trauma and move into regular life so they can actually start learning and gain an education and stuff.
Yeah. So obviously it's wildly impactful for these poor kids to go through all of that and have to relearn and rehumanize, I would imagine, in a lot of instances. But from a cold-hearted, like capitalistic point of view, it's also very bad to have damaged people that can't contribute and will probably continue.
Yeah, most of their parents are involved in drugs in some sort. There are true orphan children or abandoned children, and a lot of the babies are getting adopted, but then you have a sibling group of like 3 to 5 kids entering an orphanage type of an environment. And it's the same thing happens in the U.S. Like it's the same populations that are struggling, and so you're dealing with complex issues that there's not a solution for. And so figuring out like what's the way that you can make an impact and get some leverage from that, because kids are, you can put them to work, but that's called child exploitation, right?
Right.
And so kids for the most part are always going to be a drain on society in that way. So keeping them fed, keeping them housed, and then actually beyond that, can you actually prepare them for adulthood and help them become contributing members of society, have their own healthy families of their own, learn new patterns of behavior. These are the hardest problems, and kids don't vote. So there's no money for these kids.
Yeah.
In all the countries that we've worked in, with the exception of some Eastern European countries, there's no government funding for these kids at all outside of, so all these orphanages are private.
Wow.
They're just small donations feeding these kids day to day. And then our organization, we don't do basic necessities except for a little bit in Baja. But our focus now is to help these kids get a longer term outlook. And we have some direct impact for kids kinds of funds that we call it our child improvement priorities. So therapy, helping these kids heal from the trauma they've experienced, tutors, helping them get up to grade level. There's some fun stories I can share about some of those, but in getting the caregivers the training that they need to deal with challenging kids.
Yeah.
So that's our main core focus related to helping the children directly, and then we're doing a lot on the systemic level where we're working with policymakers and working to bridge the government changes. The government's trying to make all these changes, but they have so much turnover. Their people are poorly trained, and things are not actually getting to the end of the row. And so our focus is to actually create quality improvements for the whole ecosystem. And we're doing it in Baja specifically, but we're starting to take our program and training other organizations. And so we're finding NGO support and training other NGOs that are in the space and the ecosystem in our processes, and they're actually seeing a lot of success. And so we're starting to really grow that right now.
Yeah. There's complicated problems, and then there's very complicated problems, and it sounds like you guys are in the upper tier there. There's also nonprofits, and there's really well-run nonprofits, and I think you guys would be on the ladder there as well.
You haven't looked at our books yet. You have to actually look to see for sure.
You guys, but on the bottom of your website, you've got your reports there, so you're not afraid. But you also have 20 plus years.
Yeah.
And that would probably mean you have lots of really cool stories, right?
Yeah.
Wasn't just a flash in the pan, and it actually is working. And
well, there's lots of things that we've done that don't work, and that in a lot of ways, we're a startup still in the way that we're approaching things, and we're trying to harness technology for training and online engagement, and we're dealing with a lot of the same issues that regular startup businesses are dealing with.
Yeah. But for you, as like the leader and kind of seeing everything, how do you cope with like answering this question to yourself? Like, what the hell is going on? What's wrong with this?
Yeah, I used to care a whole lot about fixing things, and now I don't care as much about, like, I don't know. I'm a lot better parent as a result of this too. I think in a sense, like, I just try to provide as much love and focused energy as I can on things that I'm gifted at improving. Like my gifts are not related to childcare.
Yeah.
It's not even close to my gift. My skill set is a lot around event and team building and building systems and processes around onboarding. So like I can build a team very quickly and help people get their jobs going, but I'm terrible at maintenance. I'm not much of a doer. I'm pretty ineffective in those ways. And so like if you want somebody to sit down with a kid and like mentor that kid, I'm not the guy to do that very effectively. So like I think a lot of it is just I don't try to do things I suck at anymore. I used to try and figure that out, but that's where I'm at, you know?
Yeah. So building processes and teams is your strength. Once you do that, you just move on to the next problem within. Yeah,
luckily I haven't run out of problems within the organization. We're trying to take on some significant initiatives. For example, one of the ways that I'll just share a quick story. There's a fellow named Mikola, and he was the ombudsman for the children's issues in Ukraine, and I met with him in 2019 before all this stuff happened there. And one of our donors got us together and they said, "You're in Ukraine. From what I understand, you already have foster care in place. Like, I'm not sure that there's anything we can offer you." He said, "Well, while we have foster care in place, we still have orphanages, and it's going to take at least 10 years for us to shut down all of our orphanages. And in the meantime, we don't have any training for these foster families that are trying to get these kids into trying to take these kids and their families. We don't have any training for the social workers. We don't have any training for the orphanage directors. We don't have any training for the government officials that are involved in this. We have no databases. We have no infrastructure at all to speak of. He said, what do you have that we can take back? And I said, well, we don't have anything that's portable for you just to take right now. But that question, that challenge, as we started investigating, what do they have in Mexico and what do they have? They were still using Google Docs a few years ago to manage all the case management. And you delete a kid's birth certificate, it's gone, you know. And there's all these kinds of issues that just keep popping up as we've looked at it. We found one partnership where they've created the database, they've created the ability to actually get all the logistical junk out of the government's poorly organized processes and into these systems, but now they don't have training for these social workers, and this is endemic for the whole developing world. There's not really any continuing education, and that's kind of the space that we're working to move ourselves into, which is how do we professionalize the space? How do we actually get kids into families more quickly? And that can only happen through technology, because that's the only thing we can leverage, you know.
Yeah.
Intimacy that kids need can only happen on a one-on-one basis. You can only take in so many kids into your family before you don't have a family anymore. You have an orphanage, you know?
Yeah.
And so that doesn't scale. But what can scale are peer groups that can support each other, that know how to, that are facing the same challenges, you know? And we've already started setting that up. We've got an organization we call The Collective. Right now we have over 170 different people across 26 different countries, across 100 different organizations, orphanage directors, government workers, caregivers, like all types of organizations that are in the childcare space. And they meet together several times a month just on Zoom meetings, and we're using Campfire as well to deliver some of those meetings. And then we are then using smaller groups as cohorts that are actually solving each other's issues. And they're like, what more training do you have? What more training do you have? Like, what else can we do so that we can get better?
Yeah.
And so that's where we're going. We're going to be creating a continuing education type of a platform and it's going to be in languages. But here's the constraints. You got to be able to consume it on a cell phone. You got to do it where there's low data.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to do it at 7th grade level. You got to do it in all the languages of the world. You know, so AI is going to have to play a huge part in this. And so the technology constraints are fantastic and fun. Like I'm excited about hard problems, but they're not impossible problems. But they're very challenging. And so somebody's got to step into that middle space, because it doesn't matter how many laws you pass if you can't actually get the training down to the people that are doing it. And the number one thing we want to see, as far as like, here's how we're going to measure success. Just in the US, 50% of foster parents try being a foster parent once and then they quit and they never do it again. Mm-hmm. If you can just double that, if you can just, so only 20, it drops down to 25%, don't do it again. If you can just keep somebody as a social worker an extra year, if you can keep somebody as an orphanage director an extra year or two, like the ability for caregivers to not get burned out is the biggest issue in this space. And it's a problem we're facing in the US too.
Yeah.
And this is a product we want to actually roll out in the US too. So
yeah.
This is and nobody's really tried to do it for this space.
Yeah. That's impressive. And that's why I love having these conversations, because you find out a lot of things that people are doing that's pretty big and impactful. And what you guys are doing, based on your description, is a lot bigger than what most people would assume, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, we're not doing it yet. We're doing elements of it. We're just scoping it out right now. We're getting budget constraints in place. We're figuring out how might we do this. But we've been delivering trainings at a small level, but we have the hardest part, in my opinion, with small business and with especially startups, is demand generation. If you can get enough demand built, the other pieces are a lot easier to deal with.
Yeah.
I think that's the distribution model is not nearly as challenging, because we have people already lined up globally saying, what else do you got? They love our Thrive certification program, helping orphanages level up. Now it's like, how do we help individuals level up in their roles?
Yeah.
And getting kids into families is the cheapest way, but families got to feel supported and equipped, and governments can't do that today. They don't have the ability to really implement foster programs, and we're not even doing a great job in the U.S. of leading the way in most states.
Yeah. feels like a little bit of whack-a-mole, and then you solve the problems.
Yeah.
And how do you personally like cope with that? Because we've had several exchanges where you are funny, right, and a little bit sarcastic,
Sure.
and pretty direct. And a lot of this takes a bit of patience, I would assume.
Yeah. You have to have a sense of humor about things. Like one of my favorite orphanage directors, his name's Martin. He's an orphanage called Esperanza in Tijuana. And Martin grew up in an orphanage, ended up leaving, going to college, and coming back to help with the transition, and ended up staying as an orphanage director. I think he's in his like mid-30s. He's young, and he calls the kids orphans. He's like, what's going on, orphans? He's like, it doesn't matter what you want. You're just orphans. It doesn't matter what you want. You get what you get. Like because he grew up there and he grew up in that environment, he can joke. There's a lightness about it, which is you got to refuse to see yourself as the hero or as the victim.
Mm-hmm.
And that for me is like, we just don't take ourselves that seriously. And here's the thing I'm going to say that I normally don't like to say about our space, the nonprofit space. I think most people have had experiences with people in the nonprofit space where it is about the founder, or it is about the person that's actually running it. And I think that in our organization, we've been fortunate that I've never really wanted to do this job.
Yeah.
So as a result, like my identity wasn't really that tied into it. And then I'm a grandpa now. I'm like, oh, I'm old. I'm an empty nester. Like, and so now I'm a little bit older, and I'm like, oh, I've got other things in my life that I care a lot more about than being seen as the CEO of a nonprofit. And so for me, it's been beneficial to find people on my team that this is not their core identity, and they have other things going on with their lives, right? And so I don't know. What we're doing, Jesus said, the poor will always be with you, right? And I don't think that's like, and therefore you don't have to do anything for the poor. But I think the idea is like, this problem is not going to get solved because you can't get parents to stop doing drugs, and you can't get people to stop dying from cancer or AIDS or whatever other issues end up happening, and you can't fix all the corrupt governments.
Yeah.
And so you figure out where can you find leverage and make a difference there, and you just focus. And I don't feel responsible to change the world. And because of that, I now see, like, I have so many opportunities every day to make a huge difference for people.
Yeah.
And I don't have to fix anything. I just can be more present,
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's kind of it's not how I used to see things, but it's kind of where I'm at right now. I'll probably have a more mature worldview soon.
I'm sure it's evolved over time, but that was well put. You mentioned earlier this job and role has made you a better parent. Why is that?
I don't know if I'm a better parent because of the role, or being a parent has helped me in the role. But I've got 4 daughters, and I work. Our industry is mostly women that are attracted to the nonprofit sector, and so I would say we're 80% women at Child's Hope, and maybe 90. And just learning to work with women. I think I'm pretty funny, but most people don't think I'm funny when I'm teasing them, and they just think I'm a jerk, which I am too. And so I think it's beneficial to actually learn it's been beneficial to learn how to work differently. And my children have benefited from that in a lot of ways, just because I'm a lot less aggressive with them. I'm not trying to get a reaction. I'm not trying to push them as hard. My son loved it, and he reacted well to it, but my daughter's not so much.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's a good point as well. You can always tell, well, not always, but oftentimes you can tell what the parent does in their 9 to 5 and in the way they do parent in the rest of the day. Very interesting takes there. You're not afraid to get up on stage and do a little improv comedy too as well, right?
Yeah, I do that a little bit.
I think that's a big benefit if anyone ever dares to do that, or if they can just laugh even at crappy situations in the world.
Sure.
But what is that for you as far as therapy?
No, it is very therapeutic. In fact, I would say 90 to 95% of therapy, or just mental health in general, is doing things you're afraid of.
Yeah.
And facing fears with courage, and doing things that you don't want to do, but you know you should do. How's that? So like I started cold plunging like this last year, and that's my literally greatest fear was cold water. And so I did cold showers for like 6 months to build up enough courage to start actually doing a cold plunge. And now I do that 4 or 5 times a week, and that's been keep it at 38 degrees because I hate it. Like it's pure pain. It's miserable every time, and because of that, it works, right? And so like finding something you hate but love. I don't know how else to describe it, but improv was that for me for like the first year. Just getting up in practice with people. This is like 6-7 years ago. I was terrified. Like I just had this pit in my stomach. I'm feeling spastic. And like, I'm so weird. And like, I'm just getting all my energy out. And it took a year for my gut to settle down where I'd get on stage and I wouldn't be worried about what people were thinking as much. And I could just relax into it. And I think that that's most things in life. So if improv stopped being that for me, I need to find other things. Right.
Yeah.
And so I don't think it ever goes away. I think that you have to find that therapy in a variety of spaces. Right.
So cold plunging is good for you so far?
Yeah, I've been doing it since December of last year. Like I was doing cold showers, and cold showers are hard in their own way, and I still do cold showers. But yeah, I don't know how else to describe it. Like I'm a freak. I get it. I know I'm not. I know I'm not normal. So I don't care about being normal anymore. But it's been beneficial for sure.
I've talked with a few people. We're going to go off on a weird tangent here. There's certain roles or jobs in this world where there's massive spikes in anxiety and stress, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it's cops or soldiers or EMTs.
Yeah, first responders.
Yeah. And then they have to deal with it like when they retire, right? Traditionally, like the stories are pretty lined up in that vertical of like, yeah, once it stopped, then I was like miserable and all of this stuff. But everyone that I've talked, not everyone, but most people with cold plunging, it's that same thing. You just like, anxiety, anxious. Do you think like in 20 years there will be like the cold plungers that stopped doing it and they're like, well, shit, now I'm all ornery and irritable. Why is that?
I'm sure that there will be cases for that. Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
And then the doctor's like, well, what have you been? I'm just a librarian, but I did cold plunge for 20 years.
That's right. Well, what is interesting is that it's not the brain. The brain gets used to anything, and you can get used to abuse. You can get used to anything. And what's fascinating is like the first time I was doing cold showers, I was hyperventilating the whole time, just taking a shower. And I'm like, and I'm vocalizing, and my wife is making fun of me, and and so then I get out, and I'm like, that was miserable, and then after about a week, I do, and then I just breathe normally, like so the body does learn how to relax itself, how to respond to it. So I think that's a big part of it is you just have to understand that your body is going to the stories your brain are telling you are not true, and you just have to let it ride, and just let the you just and that's I think that's like I'll share one story. I have one staff member that for whatever reason we like to fight productively, I would say most of the time, but there was something inside myself that I would notice like I would want to fight unproductively, like I was just annoyed, and I'm like, she'd bring something up and I'm like, oh, why would you ask that question right now? That's going to totally derail us. All this stuff, like all the emotions, and I'm like, what I really want is for you to shut up and leave the meeting, and we can go back to where I wanted to go, right? And what I always say now, whenever I notice that emotion, is like, fascinating. Tell me more. And I learned this from like there's a book called Nonviolent Communication where that's kind of the approach, and I started to practice it, and I'm like. And I get amazing results with it. So like, it doesn't matter what I'm feeling. You do what works and that's called faith or confidence or belief or whatever you want to call it. But you have to do what works even when you don't feel like doing it.
Yeah.
And that discipline has really served me a lot better as a leader.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because in 2024, feelings are like high on the importance list of, it seems like, everyone.
Well, you have to experience the emotion and then choose a response. Your emotions, just because you have an emotion doesn't mean you should follow it. Like I want to I've wanted to kill myself multiple times over the years. Driving to the median, on the freeway, I'm just like, life is too hard. I'm done, And then you can also want to, hit somebody, or like, just because you want to do something, it doesn't mean that you'll want the consequences of doing that thing, for sure. So,
Yeah.
I mean, nobody actually believes that, but a lot of us talk like that, but that's just us looking to be victims.
Yeah.
And that's not useful.
Yeah, not useful. But that's a good way of like dealing with it, because when you get I just feel like this, fascinating,
Tell me more.
instead of, I don't care what you feel.
Yeah, I mean, because at the end of it, like, I had another person I worked with. She's no longer with us, but like, she was really great at providing feedback to me. And so, like, she didn't want to be my coach, but she ended up being my coach. And if I would say one thing that was a little bit controlling, or a little bit like, just do what I say, just that emotion.
Yeah.
I would say one thing, or I'd say one unkind thing to the team during the meeting, then I would have to pay for it for a half an hour to an hour conversation after that meeting. I'm just like, it's not worth it. It's not worth doing. It's not worth doing it. And she didn't think I was funny at all. And that was like the hardest thing probably of my life, is like, I have somebody that works with me that I appreciate and I respect, and she doesn't think I'm funny. Like, what else do I have to work with, right? Like, I've got nothing. So
The quiver's empty.
and I like. So, anyways, I had to. Your team members will always teach you a lot of things, and then you have to decide
sure.
whether you even want to still be a manager after you're like, I don't know if I can do this.
That's when you look at the train tracks and think, maybe I should just drive down them.
I've never thought about the train specifically. It always seemed like a lot of trauma for the train conductor to do that to them. But
Amen. So I've ridden tracks maybe 4 times in my life. 2 out of the 4, somebody drove their car onto the tracks. Not good for anyone involved.
Wow.
And I'm like, man, 50%. I better stop riding this damn train.
It was you, obviously.
It was really, like, what is the frequency of this? Then but yeah, like, the cops all came on for statements, and I'm trying to pry the doors open to
Like, let me out. I've got somewhere to be. Trying to get an Uber. Yeah. It'd be exhausting.
What do you have left in the tank as the leader of this organization, and what are your plans for the next couple of years? We talked a lot about some big things.
We have a major donor who has been challenging us to like expand our fundraising outreach, and that's really been my big push this year, is to find additional people that care about kids and want to see something. I mean, our existing donor base, for the most part, they've had intimate relationships with kids, with orphanage directors, and kids come and go because some are reunited with their families, some are reunited and then sent back, or the kids request to go back to the orphanage where they had more stability. There's all kinds of weird stories, like so many stories, but that core group of people that go on trips, for the most part, they're interested in changing an orphan's life. They want to change that kid's life. So, like, one quick story. There's a girl named Maria, and she was brought to an orphanage at about 11 years old. She was put in the first grade because she couldn't even write her own name. And so you imagine you're 11, turning 12, you're with these 6-year-olds, how dumb you feel. And by the end of the year, she was told she was going to have to repeat the first grade because she had made no progress. And a lot of the caregivers, not highly educated college professionals, they're usually had a junior high education themselves, so they don't have a whole lot of ability to develop these people. We were able to hire a tutor for Maria, and within 4 months, she was able to write down what you would say to her and read it back to you. She jumped all the way up to the 5th grade, didn't have to repeat the first grade, had confidence. We also had a speech therapist that was a long-term volunteer living down there that we recruited, and was able to work with that kid. So, like, that's what makes an impact for a kid. And so most people want to have that level of intimacy and want to solve the world for a kid. And now we want to change the world for orphans. And so now we're like, how do we do that? How do we provide that kind of layer of expertise and service to the world And so you're losing a layer of intimacy with the child, but what can you do with caregivers? What can you do with social workers? What can you do with therapists? What can you do with government administrators? All those people that are actually in the trenches on the day-to-day that are making sure that these things can happen.
Yeah.
And so it's a different donor base. It's a different brain that sees a need for systems, sees a need for scale.
Yeah.
And so intimacy doesn't scale,
Yep.
and it will never scale. And so that's why most people are not that interested in this challenge, because tech people or whatever, it's like, it's going to be hard all the time. It's never going to get easier. But there are things you can do to gain leverage.
Yeah.
So that's my big project right now, is to, number one, secure funding and scope the vision out so we can actually have a product that we can build. Because we've already generated the demand, we've built the community, we got the concentric circles of the funnel or whatever, and we've got our community that's driving more demand for these products. But now it's just we got to scope it, and build it, and deploy it throughout the world, and fail cheaply so that we can iterate throughout the process. But yeah, turning into a tech company in a lot of ways. So
Very cool.
that's my next couple of years. That's what I've got to do, and luckily, some people that have more technical skills are stepping up. I'm not much of I'm not a product guy, and I'm not a marketing guy. So it's like, well, he's a team building guy, but you require vision from those other parts, and that's where I think I'm pretty good at keeping people together and disappointing them at a rate that they can absorb. You never heard that definition of leadership? That's what leadership is, like disappointing people at a rate they can absorb. And it's like, well, can't give you a raise as much as you want to get paid right now, and can't give you all the responsibilities you like, but they stay engaged, right? And can't move as fast. It's just, I feel like my whole job is just can't do most of the things you guys want us to do at the pace you want us to do, but we keep making progress, and I think we're learning. Hopefully we learn quickly enough that we can keep the confidence of the donors that we have right now.
Yeah.
Keep the investment coming in.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Kent. Color me impressed with everything you guys have done over the last 20 plus years, and kudos to you and your team. Easy to talk about, hard to do. It's really cool that you guys have taken this and are running with it.
You're very kind. Thank you.
You bet.